Hello world. In this video we're going to be making some SDFs using a little graphic system that I made for my game. We're going to make some pumpkins. Figure it's seasonal, it's October. This system is described by some articles that I wrote. You can see a pointer for those below. You might want to read those before you watch this, or you might not. This video is a little bit long, so I've done my best to speed things up and fast forward through the boring sections, but feel free to skip around or watch it on 5x speed or whatever. I also made a text summary version if you want to look at that instead. There's a pointer to that below as well. But I figured this is an interactive system, and I wanted to show that interactivity, so it's one of those rare cases where maybe a video is appropriate. I'm going to do what I can to get away from the Wadsworth constant here. So let's get started. In this little framework that I have here, there's some boilerplate that I've hidden. It's not really important, but basically you can have a builder, which I describe in that article. Curve builder. The builder has some methods on it that you can chain together to create SDFs. So let's create a circle 0, 100. So there's a circle with a radius 100. I do have a constant here. Basically, this little framework here, you can create multiple rows and columns of cells, which we'll do later. So we can use that constant rather than hard coding some numbers. So there we have it. Okay, so right now it's just a white circle. This is a pumpkin that we're making eventually, so let's get the color looking a little better. I do have this other system, which I won't really go into details, but it's basically a debug panel here off to the side where I can modify some values that I set up. So I'll do that here. I don't know. Maybe I'll call it pumpkin body. Pumpkin.body.color. My default value is just orange. Do like that. And then over here on this debug panel, and I can alter it, and you can see that happen. It gets updated immediately. This whole system is really built around trying to make the developer's life, which is my life in this case, easier, and be able to turn things out more quickly and effectively. I spent a fair amount of time building this system so that then I can more effectively build the actual game. Of course, it has taken some years to get to this point, so we'll see if the trade-off is worthwhile. But I do have a long-term stance towards this game. I hope to be working on it many years in the future, so I feel like some upfront investment to make things smoother is going to pay off in the future. That's the whole festina lente concept. Make haste slowly. You take your time now so that you can move more quickly in the future. So I don't know. Do we like this color? Maybe it should be a little more saturated, a little more red-orange, maybe. That looks pretty pumpkin-y. And we can do the same thing with the background here. The window color, basically. Make it a little darker. It's Halloween. It's spooky. All right. So this is our starting point for our pumpkin. So a pumpkin, what does it look like? It's generally got some kind of indent in the top, sort of a concavity there, and then maybe the bottom should be a little more flattened. There's obviously a lot of variety, but we'll give that just kind of a starting point here. So I'm thinking keep this circle, but then chop off the top effectively, and then add 2 smaller circles to create sort of bumps, almost like a heart shape. It'll have a little indent in the middle, and we can adjust things from there. So let's do that. Let's chop off the top. Let's see. So all the objects in the system are sort of oriented towards the center of the object, the center of a box, the center of a circle. I find this is the most convenient when kind of designing things artistically. In the engine, you deal with more traditional, like the minimum and maximum coordinates, but graphically, I feel like center-based coordinates are more reasonable. So anyway, the box is going to be not at the center. It's going to be X value is going to be the center, and the Y value is going to be whatever the radius of that circle is. So 0 radius, and then the X and Y radii correspondingly are going to be, we'll just have it be a square. red and red. Anyway, we've subtracted this box from the top. Sometimes when you're doing negative space, like subtractions and intersections and stuff like that, sometimes it's useful to just visualize that shape by doing a union instead. So here you can see that's the box that we're talking about that's being subtracted from the circle. I'm going to widen this box a little. It's mostly just out of habit, but in more realistic situations for subtraction and some other operations, you don't want to kind of perfectly match up with the other object. Like right here, right on the edge of the circle, it perfectly matches the square that's being subtracted. So I'm just going to make it a little wider. I don't know, I can do just 1.5 size. I can put that union back to show you what's going on. It doesn't really matter for this case, but I've just kind of developed the habit so that if I'm adding other transforms or manipulating distance fields, there won't be little artifacts that get introduced by this just matching up perfectly. Anyway, so that's the bottom half of the pumpkin. Now we want to add 2 little circles. Let's call them bumps. And we'll put 1 bump to the left and 1 bump to the right. And it still doesn't really look like a pumpkin. It's more like that heart I was talking about, but now we're going to kind of fuse these together a little more. There's different ways to do that. One easy way, which probably is not what we want ultimately, but I'll just show it since it's easy. One easy way is to do a smooth union and put a value like 20. That takes a radius of kind of a smoothing radius, or you can think of it as a smoothing strength. And you see it's turned that sharp point into kind of a rounded one. We can make this even like a really big number. And yeah, it doesn't look terrible. You notice it has got this little clipped off bit on the right. And that's because this circle is being unioned not just with the other circle, but also unioned with this larger circle, the main body. And so it's kind of poking outside its bounds. It's actually a small bug in the builder where the smooth union doesn't expand the known bounds quite properly, but that's just a detail. We could, an easy way to fix that if we wanted to take this path, we effectively just put parentheses around these 2 circles. So they only are going to be smooth unioning with each other, not with the main object. And then we'll combine that with the main object to make the whole shape. Anyway, so this is not terrible. It looks kind of, pumpkin-like on the top. I am going to try a slightly different approach, though, that I think is a little better. Instead of this, let's get rid of that smooth union, put it 0. And we don't need this group anymore. Instead of that, we're going to move each of these smaller circles, little bump circles, we're going to move them in towards the center. And then correspondingly make their radius bigger. So they'll just overlap a little bit in the center, and then that'll cause this top indent part to join up somewhere higher up. And I need to adjust the math here a little bit so that the centers of the circles are based on the outer edge rather than the center point, like so. Not terrible. I think I will turn this union smooth back on just to round it out a little bit. They've got kind of a better, nicer, higher intersection point, so I don't need as much smoothing to make it look good as I did before. I need like a value of 100 something before, and now 20 is not terrible. Maybe do like a little more. Yeah, it's not terrible. You can just barely see that little glitch thing over on the side, so I'll just fix that like I did before. So that looks pretty good. Almost looks like a peach. So now I'm going to flatten the bottom a little. I feel like it feels like it's floating in space a little bit much. I want it to feel a little more like it's sitting on the ground and it's got a round bottom. So we just continue this. Maybe I'll put some comments in. So again, we'll subtract, and maybe we'll just kind of subtract a big box, kind of like we did on the top, but this one will be much skinnier. So we're just going to slice off a little bit from the bottom. Something like that. And again, we want to kind of smooth it out. So it's nice to have available that smoothing version of a lot of these operations. Not 200, let's do 220. It's not terrible, but not great. More smooth. Move this down a little. No, it's looking okay. Maybe even a bigger number here. 80. That's starting to look pumpkin-y. Move this down a little. Yeah. It's pretty good. Feels like it's kind of sitting in a field or something. We'll call that good for now. So that's the basic body, and now we're going to add some facial features on top. Maybe some eyes, a nose, and a mouth. Turn this pumpkin into a jack-o'-lantern. So this is the body that we've basically taken care of here. I'll just wrap that up. I'll call it body, just to keep things a little tidy on the screen. Now let's work on the face, let's call it. And here, just as a simple starting point, I'll make a circle for the nose and get it the right color. It's another fun thing you can do. I've got a couple variables that can be set in each object that can control how the visuals look. Color is an obvious one. But there's also a little bit subtle, there's a darkening around the edge that's done, and you can control that, and you can kind of make it look like it's glowing if you want to tweak the value. So I'll just demonstrate that. I don't know if I'll keep it. It's the edge bright multiplier. I think the default is less than 1 to darken it. So it's, I mean, if it were really small, it would look even darker. Yeah, like that. But we're going to make it look brighter in order to make it look like it's glowing or something. Here I'm just tweaking the values, getting the color that looks good. It does have a little more bright, glowing look. Anyway, sure, let's keep it for now. Can always get rid of it. So that's our nose in theory. Let's add some eyes. And we're going to have eyes that are just centered around the center line, and there's going to be some offset to the left and to the right. Actually, I just type all this in real time. I just do it faster for these parts. So it's starting to look like a little face. We can change that offset to be a little more. And this is just really a starting point, because we're going to add some variety and some randomization and, you know, make it interesting in a minute. But we just want to get the basics in place. This whole system is built around incremental edits and, you know, seeing what you have and then making some changes and make some artistic decisions and make some more changes. The idea is to really turn things around pretty quickly. So let's not get bogged down in making everything perfect. Okay, so we've got the eyes and nose. Let's make a mouth. The mouth will just be a rectangle for now. Yeah, it's okay for a starting point. Okay, so we've got a mouth, a face. You can pretty easily just throw in another shape there. The ellipse happens to have all the same parameters as a box, so you can get a more rounded look. It's kind of a little more surprised looking. Okay, so that's the basics for the face now. Now we want to start adding a little more interesting stuff. Maybe instead of circles for everything, we could have some triangles or squares, and maybe we'll add some teeth for the mouth. You know, make it look a little more like a real jack-o'-lantern. But because we're going to be adding variety, we'd like to be able to see more than one of these at once. You know, we'd like maybe to see a whole screen full of a bunch of different random versions. So let's do that real quick, because it's a pretty easy transformation thanks to Lua, to just pull everything that we've currently made out and move it into its own function that we can then call. So here I'm just replacing the pumpkin with a circle and making a grid of those, and then I move that pumpkin into a function and call it instead of the circle. Sometimes I have the temptation to create like some kind of UI for building objects rather than having to type in numbers. And that might be nice for speeding up the initial design process, but ultimately I want to create a lot of objects that are randomized, so I just haven't quite been able to justify that effort. Now, as we modify these and add some randomization and things like that, we'll be able to see a spread of different objects. And actually, we've got kind of space. Maybe let's add one more row. Yeah, something like that. So 30 items. There's a trick with doing a procedurally generated game. It's hard to really know for sure what all the things might get generated by it. You know, some of them might look really bad and you don't really know in advance. So having a big grid like this is a nice way to sanity check and make sure the stuff you're generating isn't bad. Make sure you're not just looking at one or two examples that happen to be lucky and look good, but you're actually generating a bunch of other stuff that's not great. So if you have a big enough spectrum of objects that you're looking at, you can have reasonable confidence that you're not generating garbage most of the time. But there can always be those edge cases where you just don't know, because you can't actually go through and verify everything perfectly. Okay, so here we are. We're going to leave the body alone. They'll just all have the same shaped body for now. And we'll just maybe make the eyes a little more interesting for a start. Right now we're just hard-coded, as you can see here, making circles. It's pretty easy to add a little variety. So here I'm just making a list of different functions that might be called and then picking one from that list randomly, so you'll get a random style of eye for each one. Like I was saying, one thing that's nice about this game is that I don't actually know what all is going to get generated, so I can actually play it and be surprised too. It's one thing that's nice about procedurally generated games. I'll just muck along and see if something looks reasonable. What is this? Oh, that's funny. Yeah, all these triangles are now in the center because I just use 0, 0 as the center, but I really want to be centered around that pause position. This is kind of a nice moment where we can use some other features of the builder here. We can translate to that position. And this basically moves our coordinate system over to that input position. And then all these points will be relative to that new center point. So that triangle is going to exist relative to that center point. So we don't actually have to go through and modify each position to be, pause plus that vector. We can just leave them as deltas from some 0, 0 origin, and we can move the origin using an overall transform that wraps it. So that should all work. And there we have some triangle eyes. That actually looks pretty good. We can tweak things, make them a little bigger. The triangles have a little less volume than the circles or the squares, so they kind of look a little smaller. So we could make them bigger to kind of keep the overall area, the amount of light coming out of each eye similar, but we'll just leave that for now. Okay, so that's the eyes. A little bit of variety there. Let's do the nose as well. Now you can see there's some all triangles here, all squares here. There's some variety of triangle, square, circle. It's just adding a little more randomness. What else should we do here? I think one thing that can be good is adding some randomness to the position, size, rotation, just kind of all these faces are pretty kind of aligned on a grid, and it makes it look a little bit artificial. So one easy thing to do is to rotate these objects a little bit. Obviously, the rotating a circle doesn't do anything, but the other ones will show something. So let's just do the eyes for now. So here I'm adding some random rotation to the triangles, which works as expected. When I do the same thing for the square eyes, you'll see they get rotated a little bit wrong. They get rotated around the center point of 0, 0, so I have to do the same trick of first pushing the position and then rotating like I did with the triangle. That's just due to the fact that transforms are not commutative. Then I also add some jitter to the nose position. And you can see that does break it up a little bit. There are some cases where, the nose and the eye are starting to run into each other a little bit. Maybe a little less jitter. maybe 0.6. Yeah, so don't see any major collisions happening here. It gets a little bit close and things like this. And that's one of the tricks here, you know, like I was saying, it's hard to know if you're going to accidentally generate some bad cases. When you add a little randomness here, you add a little randomness there, and then the combination of the two can be a problem. Like if we're going to add some jitter to the eyes now, you know, in the worst case, the nose moves towards this eye and the eye moves towards that nose, and then they overlap. To really solve all those problems thoroughly requires a little more rigorous approach. But for this demo, you know, we're just kind of fiddling around, so we'll just kind of make it look good enough. Okay, let's add some, similarly, add some randomness to the eye positions. Yeah, so now I've got some variously slightly more derpy expressions. He's kind of like raising his eyebrow a little bit. And like I mentioned, you know, there are some cases where things start to collide a little bit here. Like, doesn't look great. For this example, for the little fun we're having, maybe I'll just adjust it a little bit. It seems like the square nose is especially bad because it's kind of very big and takes up maximum space. Maybe we'll just artificially make the square nose a little bit smaller. This one's still not great, but we'll call it good. And you can always increase those numbers, you know, make 100 of them. And that way you can really see quickly if there's anything that jumps out as being especially bad. And there are cases here, you know, where it's not great, like we have seen already, but there's nothing where it's just garbage. So it seems like the combination of our little random values is reasonable. So anyway, call that good for now, for the faces. Get back to our simpler assortment here. I would like to do the mouth though. So the mouth right now is kind of boring and we want to make that more interesting. One thing I'd like to add is a little bit of curvature, you know, make it more of a smiling face than straight across flat. And there's different ways to do that. One is to just apply a transform to the mouth that will kind of bend space. And there's, you know, different choices for that. One that I find to be reasonably good is the bulge transform, as I call it. Just something I kind of just made it up, but it seems like it works pretty well for these things. So let's start with this box, since it's a nice flat line that we can judge how much bulging is going on pretty easily. So we have to keep in mind all this yellow stuff, you know, it's all effectively one object that's being unioned together. And then we want to just add a transform that only affects part of it. So this is a good case for doing a push and pop of the transform. Right now there is no transform, so it doesn't do anything, but we will in a second. And then here we'll do a bulge. Parameters for this I can never remember, but it's pretty straightforward. There's a center, which let's just have the center be 0 right now. So basically the bulge will start kind of near where the nose is and it'll push things out, which should hopefully give this mouth a bit of a curve downwards. So that's the center. What do I've got a radius. We'll just have it be the full pumpkin radius for the area that it's affected. There's an amount. Forget exactly what that means. I'll just put 1. And then there's some values that control the easing. I won't get into those. There is a useful selection of different easing values that you can have, but for right now I just want to get something simple working. So okay, well, it is kind of smiling now, but it's too much. It is now turned into a chin beard kind of thing. So that's too much. I think if I turn these to 0, that'll make a more gentle thing. Okay, yeah, so that's not terrible. The amount, maybe if I do half that, it's less extreme. Okay. And here I'm just adding some more tweaks and positioning of the mouth and rotation. Sometimes when combining normal transforms that we're used to, like translation and rotation, with these more esoteric ones like bulge, it can get a little confusing getting the order correct. But anyway, it's all consistent. It's just that it's a little harder to think of what it means to bulge a camera or something like that. So that's starting to look pretty good. You know, they kind of have different expressions. I would like to add some teeth to their mouths. Maybe let's zoom in a little bit so we can do a little more detailed work. So to do the teeth, we're gonna just keep working on the mouth, and we're gonna subtract some bits from the mouth as we go. You know, the mouth is, even though it's a jack-o'-lantern and we think of that as being, you know, the orange object, and then the eyes and mouth have been cut out of that, the way we're actually building it is we have an orange object and then the yellow object is on top of it. So it's not actually cut out. So if we cut away from the yellow object, then the orange will show through. So it'll look like the teeth are showing. That should be pretty easy. Now, it is interesting when we've applied these transforms, you know, it can kind of make it a little less clear what's going on when we're thinking about coordinates and, you know, which direction is X and things like that. So I'm going to just turn off all this translation stuff, or all the transformation stuff, and just make it back to a square. And then we'll do our work there to add the teeth, and then we'll add that smile back to their face. We just subtract a circle from the middle. Here you can see kind of what the effect is going to be. It's going to subtract away from that yellow area. So we just want to kind of go along here in a row and add some, you know, it could be circles or squares or triangles to make, you know, pointy teeth or whatever. We're just going to add a bunch of those in a row. And this is the longer section here where I write some loops to create a bunch of teeth and things like that. I have found it's a useful technique to use a t equals 0 to 1 sort of parameter, and then lerp other values based on that. It's a very commonplace technique, but I've found it personally useful. Sometimes you see other people do things like that and you don't quite understand why, and then when you start doing it yourself, it becomes very obvious why. Here I'm just fixing some bugs, getting the radius and the positioning of the teeth right, lining them up with the top row, and changing the radius just so that they're not touching the opposite gum line, so on and so forth. You get the idea. There, I add the bottom teeth as well. And then just because I mentioned it earlier, you know, it's easy to just turn on and off this set of transforms to make it more smiley. And now, you know, you see their teeth and you see their smile, and they have all of a sudden a lot more personality. Even though it was easier to think about the x coordinates and t equals whatever stuff from a more squared off view of the mouth. So anyway, we'll put that back because we're not done working on the mouth yet. Everybody just got real sober all of a sudden. Anyway, so let's do a randomized number of teeth. And as you've seen before, generally I kind of look for a good minimum number and a good maximum number, and then choose something random between those, and then kind of see if that results in any bad effects and fix those. This is pretty straightforward. Right now they're all circles, so kind of similar to before. We're going to have a selection of different tooth makers, let's call them, and as before, we're going to pick one and then use that rather than all those circles. So I pretty much just copy the code from the eyes and nose with the different shapes and create a tooth randomly in a similar fashion. Make some adjustments so they don't all look fused together and spacing looks good. I do a little bit of refactoring here just because there's some completely duplicated code. Keep things tidy. I do some tweaks to the color, but I think I end up discarding those since I like it better the way it was. And lastly, I add triangles, and they have a little bit of an issue because they're always pointing upwards, so the top teeth have kind of squared off bottoms, and the bottom teeth are pointy, but I want them both to be pointy. So I have to add an extra parameter that gets passed into the tooth function to say basically which direction is the pointy direction, which I call forward. And so then the other coordinates are based on which direction that is. So it can be dynamic, and that fixes that. And some more small adjustments for the teeth. So there's some pointy teeth. There's a bunch of pointy teeth. Kind of some big ones here. Circular teeth, square teeth. Here's a fun little bug. You can see that since we're subtracting the teeth from the mouth, we're actually subtracting the teeth from the entire yellow shape, which happens to include the eyes and the mouth. So this is a problem of grouping. We need to consider the mouth as one unit separate from the rest of the face. And right now we're not. We're just subtracting from everything. So let's fix that real quick since it's easy. Let's get to the mouth. Here we go. Mouth. We've already got this big surrounding transform, for making it smile a little bit. So we'll just kind of add parentheses around that whole thing. Begin group is like open parentheses, and likewise over here when we pop it, we'll end the group. So that'll just group the entire mouth together in one shape, so it won't interfere with other stuff. And since we're talking about that, let's turn on that smile code again and see how it all looks. You will see that because some of the random numbers are being generated for that bulge and rotation transformation, that random number kind of perturbs the rest of the random numbers. So, the contents of the mouth change for this one particular pumpkin from, these square teeth with a big open mouth. And then we kind of mess with the random number generator, and now the mouth is, the contents of the mouth are quite different. But that's just the way it goes. Could do something about that, but probably not going to bother. So here we go. Got a variety of mouths of various smiling amounts and different teeth. Feel like maybe some of the triangle teeth should maybe stick down into the mouth a little more. Some of them aren't too bad like this one, but I think generally speaking, maybe they could use a little more pointiness to them. This is just kind of for fun. This is all for fun. So that's their faces, some variety of positioning of things. I do feel like we should add one more thing, which is a little stem. It's not quite a complete jack-o'-lantern until you have the stem. The last thing is just going to be adding a new green colored bit on top. So we've got the body and the face, and now we're going to add one more section. And we're going to use a new type of shape for the stem. It's a Bezier curve, a quadratic Bezier curve to be more specific. But basically it just needs 3 points, a beginning point, a control point, and an end point, and it'll kind of make a curve from the beginning to the end. So here I am just getting the basic positions figured out and the colors a little bit. We've got the beginning and end points, and then I'll visualize the control point here with a little circle that I turn into a ring. And then we turn it into the real curve. There it is. And adjust positioning so that the stem grows out at the top. And there's that. I do briefly try putting it behind the pumpkin, see how that looks, but I don't think I like that as much. So I undo that. And then I add some randomness to the direction that the curve goes and the girth of the stem, as well as the positioning. I think I ultimately don't like jittering the base position, so I just jitter the control point and the tip. You can see that happening here, and tweak some values till it looks good. So there we go. Still want to tweak this color a little bit. I do feel like these pumpkins demand a darker background, so let's do that. There we are. And then likewise fiddle with the green of the stem a little bit. It's brighter. Let's show you what I'm doing. Darker. You know, this is the sort of thing where I feel like maybe adding some random variety to the color itself might be good. And then we could do the same for the other colors. It's really pretty easy to do, especially since we're just changing the lightness and darkness. If we want to change hue and things like that, maybe it's slightly more complicated, but let's go ahead and do that. And so you can see, like, here's a dark one next to a light one. It just gives a little more variety to the whole field here. Likewise, we could do a little variety of the other colors. And as before, I'm looking for some good low and high values and then choosing some randomness between them. Yeah, so now that kind of, again, it just gives us a little bit of visual variety. You can do the same for the yellow color. I'm not sure if that'll look as good, but let's try it. It's easy to do. Ultimately, I keep the yellow values pretty much unchanged, just add very tiny jitter. Like that. Maybe not even really noticeable, but still sometimes there's just a subtle effect that happens when there's a little more variety, and it kind of just makes it feel more alive. It's not even, it's a little bit subconscious almost. You can't really pick it out unless you're really looking for it. Like, yeah, this guy's a little lighter yellow color maybe. But anyway, I think they look pretty cute. Let's make a bunch more. Like 10 by 12 or something. 120 pumpkins. There we go. Yeah. Cool. So, hope you enjoyed the video. I enjoyed making it. The idea here is just to show you that it's pretty easy to bang together objects like this in a system like I've described. And the important thing is, since this scheme is procedurally generated, we are writing code to generate these objects. Like I was saying before, it doesn't quite make sense to spend a lot of time in a dedicated editor UI, with graphical interface, since we really need to generate it with code to get all this variety. So I put a lot of my effort into making this edit and viewing the results of your edits cycle quick and effective. So hopefully I've demonstrated that, and also demonstrated how it's easy to put together compelling shapes and little objects using SDFs. It's just a few different shapes we've used. There's circles, rectangles, triangles, a few transforms for bending things, adding and subtracting things. There's this one maybe more special shape for the stem, which is a Bezier curve, but that's not too crazy. Anyway, it's just a few simple shapes kind of whacked together, a few bits of random variation, some color variation, and I think the result is pretty decent. Let's try it completely black. Yeah, looks pretty good. All right, so happy Halloween. Hope you enjoyed the video. Bye-bye.